Welcome to Life Stories, Betrayal, Heartbreak, Redemption. Today, we bring you the powerful story of a woman who lost everything: her marriage, her home, her identity, only to rise stronger than ever. Once cast aside and humiliated, she transformed her pain into power, proving that true strength is found in resilience. Will she seek revenge, or will she choose a future beyond the past? Stay with us as we dive deep into this gripping journey of love, loss, and triumph. Subscribe to our channel now and turn on notifications to begin today's story with Life Stories. There was a time when I believed in fairy tales. The kind of love that could withstand anything: storms, time, even temptation. When I married Jason, I was certain we were writing one of those stories. He was everything a man was supposed to be: ambitious, charming, and deeply devoted. At least, that's what I had believed. For years, we were inseparable. I stood by his side through every high and low, cheering him on as he built his business empire in New York City. While others whispered about power couples, about marriages that were nothing more than arrangements, I smiled, knowing ours was different. We had love, trust, and loyalty, or so I thought. The first cracks were small. Jason started working late, his phone permanently set on silent when he was home. At first, I convinced myself it was stress. Success comes with responsibilities, and I knew how hard he had worked to get where he was. But then, the excuses became too frequent, the silences between us too long, and worst of all, his eyes. They no longer held the warmth I had once taken for granted. The whispers began soon after. Soft murmurs at charity events. Glances exchanged between friends who quickly looked away when I caught them staring. At first, I ignored them. I refused to let doubt settle in my heart. But then, one night, at a grand gala, a night meant to celebrate one of Jason's biggest business deals, I saw the truth with my own eyes. I walked into the venue in an emerald silk gown, the very dress Jason had once said was his favorite. I had spent hours preparing, wanting to remind him of what we had, wanting to bring back the spark that felt like it was slipping away. But none of that mattered the moment I saw him across the room. He stood with Vanessa. She was a woman I had met only once before in passing. Yet something about her presence now felt threatening. Jason leaned toward her, his fingers grazing her lower back in a way that made my breath hitch. And Vanessa, she smiled at him. Not the polite smile of a business associate, but something else entirely. Possessive, smug. It was the smile of a woman who knew she had won. The ice in my veins spread as Jason's gaze met mine across the crowded room. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He simply stared, his expression unreadable, as if he were already lost to me. I could have screamed. I could have caused a scene, demanded answers. But I didn't. I refused to be the woman who lost control in public. Instead, I smiled, walking toward them with the poise I had perfected over the years. "Darling," I greeted, my voice steady even as my insides burned. Jason barely hesitated. "Emily, you remember Vanessa, don't you?" His voice was smooth, casual, devoid of any guilt. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her glossy lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smirk. "Of course," she said, her voice dripping with feigned warmth. "Jason speaks so highly of you. I feel like I know you so well." It was a subtle insult, but I heard it loud and clear. She wasn't just a flirtation. She wasn't just a distraction. She was a threat. That night, Jason came home late. Again, he offered a casual excuse, an urgent business meeting, but I knew he had been with her. The next morning, I confided in Ryan, my younger brother, my only real confidant. "You're overthinking, Em," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Jason's a powerful man. Women like her are always going to orbit around him. That doesn't mean he's cheating." But I wasn't convinced. The pit in my stomach refused to settle. And so, against my better judgment, I did something I never thought I would. I started watching my own husband like a stranger. It didn't take long to confirm what my heart had already suspected. Jason wasn't just having an affair. Vanessa was deeply embedded in his life, slithering her way through his world like a snake, tightening her grip. And worse, this wasn't new. The signs had been there all along. I had just been too blinded by love to see them for what they were. One night, I overheard them in his study. Vanessa's voice was low, intimate. She doesn't understand you, Jason, she purred. She holds you back. You're meant for more, and all she does is weigh you down with outdated notions of loyalty. And then, the worst betrayal of all. Jason's response. You're right, he murmured. I don't know why I've let her control me for so long. A cruel laugh from Vanessa. The unmistakable sound of a kiss. I staggered backward, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just an affair. This was a carefully orchestrated game. And I was the piece Vanessa was slowly moving off the board. The days that followed were unbearable. Jason stopped pretending to hide his indifference. Our dinners became silent. He ignored my presence, treating me like I was already fading from his life. And Vanessa? She no longer bothered with discretion. She walked into our world with confidence, as if she were waiting for the final move. And then, that move came. At another gala, this time a high-profile charity event in Los Angeles. I arrived in an elegant navy gown, prepared to hold my head high. But the moment I entered the room, the whispers started. The admiring glances I once received had turned into cruel smirks. My so-called friends exchanged knowing looks, their conversations laced with pity and amusement. Something was wrong. And then I saw him. Jason stood near the center of the ballroom. Vanessa draped over his arm like she belonged there. Her dress was a bold, shimmering red, a deliberate contrast to my elegance. A statement of ownership. And Jason? He looked at her the way he used to look at me. I forced myself to move forward, my breath unsteady. Jason, I greeted, my voice betraying none of the agony inside me. He turned, his face unreadable, as if I were nothing more than a distant memory. Vanessa's smirk deepened. Oh, Emily, she cooed, feigning surprise. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. And then Jason delivered the final blow. You shouldn't have come. The humiliation was unbearable. The whispers grew louder. The stares pierced through me. And in that moment, I realized Jason didn't care who saw this betrayal. He wanted me to see it. That night, as I sat in my dimly lit bedroom, staring at the divorce papers in front of me, I understood the cruelest truth of all. I had already been erased from his life. And Vanessa had won. But what none of them realized, what Jason and Vanessa would never see coming, was that I wasn't done. Not yet. I used to believe that love was enough. That if you gave someone your heart, your loyalty, your unwavering support, they would cherish it. But the night Jason humiliated me in front of our entire social circle, I realized love alone couldn't hold a marriage together. The divorce was swift. It was clear that Jason had been preparing for this moment long before I even knew my marriage was over. The papers had been drawn up with meticulous detail, false accusations of infidelity, claims that I was manipulative, even suggestions that I was unfit to be by his side. Lies. All of it. But that didn't matter. He had the power, the influence, and the connections to make those lies feel like truth. Within days, I was gone. The penthouse I once called home was no longer mine. The security guards, who had once greeted me with warmth, now stood motionless as I carried my last suitcase out onto the pavement. Jason hadn't even been there to see me off. He had left that privilege to Vanessa. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, amusement shining in her eyes. I told you, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. You never deserved him. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to let her know that she hadn't won. But I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I lifted my chin, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You may have stolen him, I said, my words precise, cutting. But I was never the one who didn't deserve him. That's you. For the first time, her smirk faltered, but she recovered quickly, tossing her hair over her shoulder with a laugh. Say what you want, Emily, she said, her tone taunting. But at the end of the day, I'm the one inside, and you're the one out here, begging for scraps. She turned and walked inside, closing the door behind her. And just like that, the life I had spent years building was gone. For the first time in my life, I had nothing. No home, no security, No identity beyond the woman Jason left behind. But I refused to break. The first few months were brutal. The world that had once embraced me now acted as if I didn't exist. The so-called friends who used to fawn over me at galas avoided my calls. My name, once associated with elegance and influence, had become a whisper of scandal. The only person who stood by me was Ryan, my younger brother, my fiercest protector. He found me a tiny, rundown apartment in Brooklyn, a far cry from the luxury I had once known. The first night I spent there, alone, in a space that barely had enough room for my belongings, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know who I was without Jason. For years, my entire identity had been wrapped around being his wife, his partner, his supporter, and now, I was just Emily, a woman who had been discarded like she was nothing. But if Jason thought I would crumble, he was wrong. I took any work I could find, cleaning offices at night, assisting in small businesses that barely paid enough to cover rent. I learned how to stretch a meal, how to live on pennies, how to survive without the privileges I had once taken for granted. It was humiliating, it was painful, but it was necessary. Ryan watched me struggle, watched me break down in exhaustion more times than I cared to admit. But he never pitied me. He only pushed me forward. You're not meant to stay in the shadows, Em. He reminded me constantly. You need to start thinking like them. The only way to beat people like Jason and Vanessa is to rise higher than they ever imagined. At first, I didn't believe him. I had no money, no connections, no way to fight back. But then, one night, everything changed. I had been working late at a small financial firm, barely scraping by, when I overheard a conversation in the office. A discussion about an untapped market. An opportunity no one had noticed before. It was risky. It would take everything I had. But if I could pull it off, I wouldn't just rebuild my life. I would become a force that no one, not even Jason, could ignore. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. The moment I decided to fight back, something inside me shifted. I was no longer just trying to survive. I was determined to rebuild myself into someone unstoppable. I spent the next few years working tirelessly, learning everything I could about finance, investments, and business strategy. I took risks, some that nearly broke me, but I refused to give up. Every late night, every rejection, every obstacle only fueled my determination. And then, after years of struggle, I made my first breakthrough. Through careful research and relentless networking, I discovered a business opportunity that no one had capitalized on, an untapped market in investment consulting. I took every penny I had saved and launched my own firm. Starting with small clients, building a reputation, and slowly earning the trust of larger investors. It wasn't easy. Many people still saw me as Jason's ex-wife, a woman cast aside in disgrace. But I used that to my advantage. I turned the whispers into motivation, proving them all wrong. Within a few years, my company grew into something far greater than I had imagined. The woman Jason had discarded had become one of the most respected businesswomen in the industry. And I wasn't done. Through my expanding network, I gained access to information I never had before: hidden transactions, financial reports, whispered confessions from people who had once feared speaking out. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Vanessa hadn't just stolen Jason's affection, she had orchestrated my entire downfall. The lies about my supposed infidelity, the accusations in the divorce papers, the narrative that made me look unfit to be Jason's wife. It had all been part of her plan. She had been manipulating Jason for years, poisoning him against me, making sure that when the time came, he wouldn't hesitate to throw me away. I sat in my office late one night, staring at the documents in front of me. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the sheer rage building inside me. I had been played, manipulated, cast aside like I was nothing. But they had underestimated me. Vanessa had taken everything from me once. I wasn't going to let it happen again. The first step of my plan was subtle. I started making moves in the business world that directly impacted Jason's company. Through strategic investments and silent partnerships, I slowly gained influence over key divisions of his firm. And then, When the moment was right, I made my biggest move. A hostile takeover. The news spread like wildfire. The headlines screamed about it, an unexpected business power play that threatened to dismantle Jason's empire. And the mastermind behind it? Me. Jason had no idea what was coming. But by the time he realized it, it was already too late. The woman he had once thrown away was now the biggest threat to everything he had built. And this was only the beginning. Jason's world unraveled faster than he could control. I watched from the sidelines as the chaos unfolded. Each move I had carefully orchestrated, sending shockwaves through his company. At first, he didn't take it seriously. He thought it was just another business competitor trying to make a name. But then, when my name surfaced in the headlines, Emily Carter makes a powerful return to the financial world, he knew. I imagined his face when he first saw it. The moment he realized that the woman he had discarded was no longer some forgotten relic of his past. No, I was the future. I didn't stop with the takeover. I had spent years gathering information. And now, I was ready to use it. One by one, I exposed Vanessa's wrongdoings, fraudulent transactions, insider deals, manipulation tactics she had used to climb the corporate ladder. The media caught on, and within weeks, Vanessa went from being a respected socialite to a woman under public scrutiny. Jason, on the other hand, was slipping. Investors were backing out. Board members were questioning his decisions. He was losing control of his empire. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one holding the power. And that's when he came to me. I was in my office when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Carter, Jason Carter is here to see you." I leaned back in my chair, smiling at the irony. Jason had always been a man who controlled his world with unwavering confidence. Yet now, he was standing outside my door, seeking an audience with the woman he had so easily cast aside. "Send him in," I said, my voice calm, controlled. The door opened, and there he was, the man who had once been my everything, the man who had replaced me without a second thought. But he wasn't the same Jason I remembered. His suit was still expensive, his posture still strong, but there was something different about him now, an unease in his eyes, a hesitance in his steps. For the first time, he wasn't in control. He sat across from me, exhaling slowly. "You've made your point, Emily." His voice was steady, but I could hear the edge beneath it. I arched a brow. "Have I?" He clenched his jaw. "The takeover, the media leaks. You're systematically dismantling everything I built." I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hands. "Funny, Jason. That's exactly how I felt when you left me with nothing." Silence. He had no defense, no excuse, just the weight of his own regret settling in. Then, he did something I never expected. "I was wrong," he admitted. His voice was quiet, almost sincere. "I was blinded by her, by what I thought I wanted." For a moment, I almost believed him. But then I remembered every night I had cried alone, every moment I had doubted my worth. Jason Carter wanted a second chance. But I wasn't sure if I had any left to give. Jason's confession lingered in the air between us, thick with regret and lost time. He was finally admitting what I had known all along, that he had thrown away something real for an illusion. But was I supposed to care? For years, I had waited for this moment, thinking that if he ever came back, I would finally have the closure I needed. Yet, now that he was sitting across from me, looking at me with the eyes of a man who finally understood his mistakes, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just indifference. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my blazer. "Jason," I said, my voice calm, steady, "I didn't build this life just to turn around and look back at the one I lost." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Maybe he had already known my answer before he even walked into this room. That evening, as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, looking out at the city I had reclaimed, I finally felt free. The revenge, the battles, the fight, it was over. I had won, not because I had destroyed Jason or Vanessa, but because I had rebuilt myself into something greater than they could have ever imagined. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Adam stood there, hands in his pockets, a quiet confidence in his eyes. "Are you finally ready to stop looking back?" he asked. I smiled, stepping forward. I already have. And just like that, I chose my future. Thank you for watching Life Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video.